Happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to today's Water Wednesday. My name is Yiling Zhuang. I'm the Water Resources Regional Specialized Agent with University of Florida IFAS Extension. So we've been offering this Water Wednesday for a few months. We started Water Wednesday in May. Now this is, I think it's the 13th episode of Water Wednesday. If this is the first time you tune in, you may wonder what is Water Wednesday. So Water Wednesday is a group of agents and specialists with University of Florida IFAS Extension. We offer a Facebook live talk every Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock. We talk about Florida's precious resources, water, for about 30 minutes. So every Wednesday afternoon, we give a talk about Florida's water and how we can do or what we can do to protect Florida's water. For last few Water Wednesdays, we've been covering residential water issues, including how to calibrate your water systems, or it's what kind of Florida-friendly plants you can have in your yard to save water. If you miss those topics, I will post a link, our YouTube channel link for all the recordings. You can get on our YouTube channel to watch these recordings. And today's talk is a little bit different. We'll switch the topic a little. We'll talk about virtual water, since now it's the digital era. So everything goes online. We are doing our program online. So do you know what virtual water is? So if you haven't heard of virtual water, or if you don't know what that is, today it's your opportunity to learn virtual water. And we have our guest speaker, Morgan Picton and Tina McIntyre from Seminole County Extension. So they will give us a quick overview of virtual water. Now let's welcome our guest speaker.
Thank you, Yilin. I think maybe Morgan is having issues unmuting.
Sorry. All right, so hi everyone, my name is Morgan and this is Tina, and I'm going to turn it over to her to start, so just bear with me as I get the screen shared real quick.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay, great. Yes, welcome everyone to another installment of Water Wednesdays. So today's topic is a little different, but I am excited to partner with Miss Morgan Pinkerton to kind of talk a little bit about virtual water. And so if this is a new concept for you, we're excited to share it with you today. So diving right in, where in the world is our water? So Earth is made up of 71% of water. So that's a lot. Not a lot is actually in our land mass, but actually in H2O form. Now, only 2.5% of that is fresh water. So you can see this little sliver here at the bottom, the light blue. So only 2.5% of all the water found on Earth is fresh water found in our lakes, rivers, streams, things like that. Now, 1% of that fresh water is available to use. So a lot of that fresh water that you might be saying, well, 2.5%, where is it all? A lot of it's in our glaciers. So it's frozen up at the North and South Pole, and we really just don't have access to it. So this 1% might be found, like I said, in our lakes, rivers, and streams as surface water, or in our Florida aquifer or other aquifers around the country. Aquifers, and we've talked a little bit about aquifers here on Water Wednesdays before, are usually made up of limestone here in Florida, this very karst limestone material. So it's rock, but it's porous like a sponge. It's very, very hard, but it has like Swiss cheese holes all in it. And so the water can flow through those. Can be big caverns, small caverns, tiny cracks and holes all throughout the substrate here. And so here's kind of a side wedge that we would credit to the Central Florida Water Initiative, which is a conglomeration of the water management districts and other entities around the Central Florida area. And basically, this is where the water that we use for every day, for our washing our, hair, to washing our cars, to drinking, to watering our lawns, is typically found in the aquifer. And it's also what feeds our springs. So when you go to a spring and you see that, vibrant bubbling up, that water's coming from the aquifer. As we, put a straw in it through a well and drink the water and utilize the water for our landscapes and everything over time, that water in the aquifer does start to decrease. So the springs might have less flow and different environmental issues arising from the consumption of the water. So we're gonna bring in Morgan now, and she's gonna kind of cover how much water do we use each day.
All right, so just think about real quick about how much water you think you use on a daily basis. So one of the things you might initially think of is drinking water. You use about an average of a half a gallon per day. So a little bit of water is added to our bucket here. And then water in the household, as Tina mentioned, you might use it for washing your clothes, washing your car, doing dishes, things like that. The average American will use about 100 to 200 gallons of water just in the household every day. So that adds a pretty decent amount more of water to the amount of water we're using every day. But what about the food that we eat? So this food took water to produce, which we'll talk a little bit more when we get to the concept of virtual water. And if we consider all the water we're using, including the food we're eating, it really pushes us over, and it's a lot of water that we're using on a daily basis. So let's look at an example here. If you have 1 cup of coffee, you would expect that that's going to equal 1 cup of water. So I don't know about you, when I make coffee, if I'm making a single cup, I pour a cup of water into the back of the machine and out comes 1 cup of coffee. However, that's not the case. That 1 cup of coffee actually took something more like 592 cups of water to make. So what happened here? Well, if you think about where your coffee came from, you have coffee beans. And from the time that you plant a coffee bean and get a coffee tree that's going to produce coffee beans that we can use to make coffee, that takes about 3 to 4 years. And during that 3 to 4 years, that plant needed water to be healthy, to stay alive, and in order to be able to produce those coffee beans to make your cup of coffee. So looking at another example here, again, you think 1 bottle of water would equal the same amount of water in a glass in a reusable container. But again, that's not the case. 1 bottle of water took almost double the amount of water to produce it. And this is because there's water that goes into producing that plastic and bottling that water itself. And water is said to be the most efficient bottling industry. So compared to sodas and juices and other bottled products, it's the most efficient in its use of water. But this is why we suggest using reusable containers for your water, not only because it's saving plastic and reducing plastic waste, but it's also saving the water that you're using to get that water to drink. So we're going to go over another example here and see just how far water gets us. So if we have 683 gallons of water, let's see what we can get from that. So from 683 gallons of water, we can get about 6 pounds of alfalfa. And for those of you that don't know, alfalfa is commonly used as a feed in hay for animals. So from that 6 pounds of alfalfa, we can produce 1 cow. And that 1 cow is going to give us 1 gallon of milk. So we have turned 683 gallons of water, that's a lot of water, into a single gallon of milk. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio, just like it wasn't 1 cup of coffee to 1 cup of water.
If you guys have questions along the way, feel free to throw them in the chat and Facebook. This is an interesting and kind of novel topic. So if you have thoughts in your head, just chat them in, or questions, feel free.
Yeah, definitely. So along that lines, we want to know, how much water do we use on a daily basis if our food has so much water in it? Let's just take 1 meal as an example. So let's go a classic American meal here where we have a hamburger, French fries, and I put a juice in here just instead of a soda. But so you have a glass of orange juice, Florida fresh orange juice that takes about 56 gallons of water to produce. And your hamburger, a little bit more intensive to have your bun, your hamburger, your cheese, and whatever toppings you like on your hamburger. It took about 698 gallons to produce. So there's some products that are a little bit more intensive in the terms of water used to produce them. And then can't have a hamburger without French fries. You have another 275 gallons of water with your French fries for a total of 1,029 gallons of water in a single meal. And I don't know about you, but I eat more than one meal a day. So if you multiply this and try to estimate how often you're consuming virtual water and how much of it you're really consuming, that's a lot of water to consider.
I have a question, Morgan.
Yeah.
So if that was like a black bean veggie burger versus a regular hamburger, do you think the numbers would be different or the same?
So it is thought that it would be different. So you expect that meat products are going to take a little bit more water to produce, kind of like what we saw with our example of the water going to the alfalfa, to the cow, to 1 gallon of milk, where as you trickle down the food system like that, you're going to see more water being used to produce the single item. So you'll get more water in terms of virtual water used for plants. So you'll get more plants out of the same amount of water that you would an animal product.
Gotcha. So the veggie bean burger might be a little less than the hamburger.
Yeah, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but it is important to consider your food choices and think back to how much water is going into your individual foods. So that takes us to our topic of today. What is virtual water? And virtual water is described as the total water that goes into producing a product. And we sometimes call that our invisible water because we can't really see it. I may be eating an apple and not really consider how much water went into producing it. And it's estimated that the average American uses about 1,802 gallons of virtual water every day. So that's a lot more than what we estimated in our just daily consumption and household use of water. And virtual water is composed of a couple different types of water. It includes blue water, green water, and gray water. And blue water is what we normally think of when we think of water. That's the water that's coming out of your faucet. It's in our surface water and groundwater sources. And it's just the simplest form of water that you can think of that's fresh and safe to drink. Green water is the water that's being stored in our plants and in the soil. And this is often the water that's coming down as rain and then being taken up by the plants to produce sugars and to produce products like the commodities that we eat, like apples, oranges, what have you. And then gray water is what we consider a lower quality of water. It's our wastewater that we're producing because it's polluted in some kind of way. So in the household, if we wash some dishes with soap and whatever food scraps are now in that water, that's considered gray water because it's no longer safe for our consumption. It's contaminated in some way, whether it be by soap, dirt, or whatever else we're using it for.
Hey, Morgan, would reclaimed water be a good example of gray water?
Yes. So reclaimed water is a great example of gray water. It's not safe for us to drink, but we can still use it to water our plants. But it kind of depends on how contaminated it is and if we can reclaim it to a point that we can use it again. So if it was full of soaps and things like that, we don't want to pour it directly on our plants because it'll hurt our plants to have all those toxins in the water. So we've mentioned a couple of places of where our water is going, and personal consumption is one of the first ones we think about, the water that we're drinking. But there's also the household use of water. And it's important to consider that in addition to all the laundry, all the dishwashing, and everything we're using water for, showering, flushing our toilets, everything, still about 50 to 60% of household use is to water the lawn. So we're using a lot of water in our house, and we're also using a lot of water on our lawns, which is also considered that household use. We also see our water going to commercial purposes. So this could be any business that also uses water. So for example, if you take your clothes to get washed at a laundromat or to get washed at a dry cleaning place, they're using water in order to clean your clothes, but it's more than that. There's so many different businesses. Restaurants are using water, a lot of different places to where our water is going commercially. And then also irrigation of crops. We are using a lot of water to produce the food that we are eating. And as we saw in our example with the cow producing a gallon of milk, we're irrigating crops in order to produce plants to feed our livestock as well as ourselves. And then that brings us to virtual water trade, because if we're keeping track of this water and what's going into our commodities, we also have to consider how we're moving this food all around the world. So globalization has led to the movement of goods and people all over the world. That's a really important statement to consider. 200 years ago, you would probably be surprised to see someone who has been to another country or has traveled across the world, because it wasn't as common as it is today. So we're moving people, we're moving goods along with these people, and we're trading all across the world. And we're also seeing increased urbanization. And this is when we're seeing people concentrate in cities, in localized areas, and moving away from the rural and open landscapes to high rises and more concentrated populations. And in these rural areas, since there is a lot of open land and land available, that's where we're producing a lot of our agricultural commodities. But all these people in these cities are going to be hungry and need these agricultural commodities. So we're sending our goods from the rural areas to these cities. So along with these goods is moving that water, because those goods took water to produce and to grow. So our virtual water is becoming concentrated as it moves from these open and spacious areas into the more highly populated cities where they're being used more frequently. And this is a really good graphic by Seth Darling about how our water is being traded throughout the world. And there's some countries that are major exporters and then some that are major importers of virtual water. And you can see the United States is really dark blue there. We're a major exporter of water, and we are known to be a pretty big powerhouse in terms of international trade. So we're sending goods across the world all the time. And let's take, for example, some of our agricultural commodities. These are three that are really prominent in Florida. You have tomatoes, grapefruit, and watermelon. So for every watermelon we're sending to another country, along with it is leaving about 37 gallons of virtual water. And if you can imagine, we're shipping a lot more than just one watermelon at a time out. We're shipping tons and tons of products, and along with that, it's all moving our virtual water. So although we have a lot of water resources in the United States, we're slowly depleting them as we send them to other areas of the world. So why should we care about, sorry, you had a question, Tina?
Oh, I was just gonna say, so some crops, require more water and are part of that bigger water trade than others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely true. There are some crops that are more water intensive to produce. And that's something from the research side of things that we're hoping to produce better agricultural products that use less water in the input and that's better at conserving water. But from your perspective, why should you care about virtual water? Well, we've kind of already talked about how water is limited. What is readily available to us is a very small amount. The stuff that's clean enough for us to use, to drink, it's very limited, and we need it to survive and grow and to produce our food. And that limited water, it can very easily become polluted. Imagine how fast we're going through water when you think about how often you're doing dishes and doing laundry, because that water can no longer be safe for human consumption after it gets tainted. And then as populations increase, we're also going to see an increased demand in water. Currently, there's about 7.8 billion people in the world, and it's estimated that by 2050, we'll have closer to 9 billion people. And when we talked about in the United States, we use about 1,800 gallons of water, virtual water every day. for every person we're adding to the population, we're adding just as much water and an increased demand at the same amount of supplies that we currently have. And the same is true for affluence and technological advancements. As we continue to produce all these products and these cool gadgets, we're also continuing to use our water resources, and we're using them faster than we had in the past. And it's really important to consider that most people don't know how much water they're using on a daily basis, and for this reason, they may not be in tune to trying to conserve it. If they think it's an unlimited resource, then they might just use it as if it is so, when in fact we have a very limited supply of this and we need to conserve what we have. So in the future, it's something we need to consider about is the amount of water we do have available. Throughout the world, it's estimated that 1 in 3 people still don't have access to safe drinking water. And this isn't just limited to other countries. In the United States, we've also seen issues where there's a problem getting water. Although it's more widespread that there is safe drinking water here, you think out to the droughts that were happening in the West, and then also the issues with water contamination in Flint. There's a lot of current events that we're seeing where water is becoming an increasingly hard to find resource. And then what we can expect from that is for conflicts to arise between competing entities that want access to water. And you may expect that this is kind of an image where there's a bunch of people out in a desert where there's only one little puddle of water and they're fighting over it because that's the drinking water, but it's not. It's happening in our backyard. We can talk about the tri-state water conflict, which is between Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. And this is right here, and it's a problem that's dealing with Florida. So it's not just limited to other places. With this conflict, we're battling over the water source that's coming out of the Chattahoochee River. And that's because the water is flowing through multiple states and ending in the bay on the northwest of Florida. And in that area, we have a really big shrimping and other seafood industry that relies on that water coming down and coming readily available in that area. And in Georgia, the population in Atlanta is continuing to grow, and therefore the water demand higher up the stream is increasing, and we're seeing higher water uses. So we're concerned about the impacts that's going to have when that water flow starts to change and it's disrupted as it gets further down the river to the Florida area. And so, like I mentioned, it's in our backyards, and it's going to continue to be a problem throughout the world. It's estimated that there's going to be about 4 to 5 additional water conflicts every year that are arising. And some might not be as peaceful as some of the ones we've seen. They could end up in less peaceful actions to try to fight over water.
Yeah, and that tri-state conflict we have going up in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida is actually reflected in the marketplace. I know growing up, we always used to get Apalachicola oysters, and now you really just can't find them. The oyster bed has had, problems with not having the water flow and over harvesting and things like that. And those oysters are not really available right now, and haven't been for several years. Hopefully, we can come to some solution and get those oysters back, because they were always so good.
Yeah, so water is going to continue to be a really big issue for us, and a lot of great investors out there say investing in water technologies is going to be the news of the future, because it's really where a lot of our problems are going to come as we continue to consume so much water and the demand increases. So I'm going to turn it over to Tina.
Thanks, Morgan.
And she'll finish us out.
Yeah, so just kind of building on that. So what does water look like for our future? Here in Central Florida, like I mentioned, the Central Florida Water Initiative, which is, again, a conglomeration of our water management districts and our utilities and other partners around the area. They have some predictions predicting out to 2035, and they've made this nice little kind of handy graphic. So the average total water use currently is 800 million gallons per day. Now, this does not include virtual water. This is just actual, watering our lawns, drinking water, our water, the actual consumed water. 800 million gallons per day. Projecting out to 2035, we're looking at 300 million gallons per day additional. Okay, so here on our little graphic, we see our current 800, and then we add the 300 to that. Now we have about 50 that is available in our traditional groundwater. So we do have some wiggle room going on down there in our aquifer, but that still leaves a deficit of 250 million gallons per day for our growing Central Florida area that could potentially be needed that we're not going to have in our aquifer. So we're basically looking at, pulling from surface water and heavy conservation measures to be able to kind of mitigate the demand. So it's all about, how much water we're actually using. If we can use conservation measures in our home and in our landscapes to reduce that need, then maybe we can save some water moving forward. Oh, sorry guys, I don't know why it clicked out there. So figuring out what your water footprint is actually fairly easy. So the total amount of water, including your virtual water that you use every day. So that includes your indirect and your direct use. So that could be, indirectly, like she said, the water bottles or the grapes that you eat or the foods that you eat. And then directly, if you're actually just drinking, some water or using to take a shower, things like that. So if we go to water footprint, our watercalculator.org, we can actually calculate our footprint and we can think about this. So you might have heard of carbon calculators and things like that. But this one is for water and it includes the virtual water. And it's all based on some estimations, but you put in your, your different aspects of how you live and, things like that. And then it'll kind of give you an idea of your water footprint, including the virtual water. So that's kind of an interesting thing, kind of start and have a starting place to go off of. And then you might say, well, how can I save water? How can I institute some of those conservation measures in my own home, in my own life, so that when we get to 2035, we're not having that, 250 million gallons per day deficit. Well, of course, we want to do all the things, limiting our water when it's only when it's necessary. So we're not, just being frivolous with turning the spigot on and leaving it, or, making sure that our people in our house are educated about, using the water properly and being a good steward. I know when I was growing up, my grandmother was very adamant about not wasting resources. And one time she did catch me brushing my teeth with the water on, and she was very upset with me. So since that day on, I've always turned my water off when I'm brushing my teeth. And, over the years, I'm sure she's helped me save gallons and gallons of water. We want to also install water efficient devices and appliances. So if you're, considering a renovation or you need a new appliance, always look for the Water Star, or, Water Star is really the main one. For energy efficient, you'll look for the Energy Star ones as well. Sometimes it'll be bang for your buck. You'll get two, 2 for 1, Energy Star and Water Star, say if it's a washing machine for your clothes or something like that. So selecting those nice appliances can save you a lot on your water bill, but also save water. Using a reusable water bottle for drinking can save a lot of water. So not only are we, like Morgan said, not having all the plastic in the plastic water bottles, but recycling itself, the process of melting that water bottle down, can use water as well. So we want to definitely buy a really good reusable water bottle that works for you, and just kind of stick with it, and you will save a lot of water just by doing that. I really like, a lot of this stuff can be kind of doom and gloom, and so I like those personal actions that we can all take that really do add up over time. Also thinking about the foods that you eat, and now that you understand virtual water, maybe selecting for local foods. So looking for fresh from Florida is going to help, save water, because transportation and, gasoline and everything tends to use water as well to produce. So, just selecting fresh from Florida, thinking about one crop versus another crop might have a little less water. And you can play around on that virtual water tool as well. And again, supporting local farming. So community gardens, growing food in your backyard is a great way to start as well. And, other options for CSAs, community supported agriculture, or community markets, things like that. So some other ways, of course, I work with a Florida Friendly Landscaping program, and we have a lot of ways. Like Morgan said, 50 to 60% of our home water use is going to watering our landscape, watering our lawns. And so if we can have a more sustainable landscape where we're utilizing Florida friendly plants and we have a rain barrel, we're going to be, protecting the water supply for our future. We have lots of classes throughout Extension. And right now, you guys have the added benefit that every Extension office is pretty much virtual. So you can take advantage of all kinds of different programming around the state that the agents are doing. And then finally, checking with your local utilities. So we do have a really great program for anybody who is a client of the Seminole County Utilities. We have, they actually do free irrigation audits by Cato Institute. And so Cato, they hire Cato to come out and do a free irrigation audit. So if you are a Seminole County utility, give them a ring and get that irrigation audit scheduled so you can be sure that your irrigation is calibrated properly and working efficiently. But even if you're not in Seminole County utility service area, call your local utility, call your local municipality, your county or your city, to see if they offer a free rain sensor or other aspects, soil moisture sensor, or rain barrels or things like that you can get involved to install some of these Florida friendly practices in your own yard. And with that, we will take any questions. I'm turning it back over to Yi-Lin and see if we have any questions coming in from either Zoom or Facebook.
Thank you both. That's a very interesting topic. I do have one question here. Actually, it's a perfect question. The question is about how has plastic affected our water? So please hold on, because that will announce our September theme. So the theme, the Water Wednesday theme of September will be microplastics. So the whole September, we will talk about how plastics have affected our water and what we can do to reduce plastic use. So please stay tuned, and I will post our event info shortly, maybe by the end of this week. And meanwhile, I'm still checking our Facebook page. I don't see any questions here. Let me check, because I know we have delay in the Facebook. We just finished the talk, so people may be still typing the questions. We will wait for a few minutes. And during this time, I do want to do I call it, what's the word for that? Scam alert. So now some scammers, they are getting crazy. They are copying our event and post everywhere. So basically look exactly like our programs, but that's not our program. And during the registration, they ask you to they will ask personal information or financial information. So just please keep in mind, don't disclose any of your personal info or financial info to any insecure website. So for our whole Water Wednesday series, it's free. So you don't need any credit card information to attend our Water Wednesday. So this is something I want to put it here. I already shared in the chat box. It's our Water Wednesday recording, and another one is our evaluation. So we will greatly appreciate if you can take a few minutes, actually only a minute, to complete the Water Wednesday survey. Just tell us how we can improve that. So we always appreciate your feedback. And let me check the Facebook again. So I haven't seen any questions here. And for our Zoom, I don't see any questions here either. So it looks great. Oh, wait a minute. I saw a question, it's on the Zoom. So we have seen reduced water flows across most water management districts and especially springs. Do you have any tools to help us advocate to our local water?
Great question. And yes, so there's something called minimum flow levels for our springs. And basically, it's a requirement that the state said that, yes, we have to have a minimum amount of water flowing out of each spring to kind of maintain the river, to maintain our recreation, to maintain and support wildlife. We have seen these minimum flow levels drop over the years. I'm sorry, not the requirements, but the actual flows. And so each county and state agencies, Department of Environmental Protection, will actually go out and measure the velocity of various streams and springs throughout the state and kind of monitoring them to make sure that they're not being reduced for these minimum flow levels or MFLs. Sometimes you can really, I would recommend just maybe calling your local representatives and letting them know that you have certain opinions about the springs. I can tell you that certain amounts of funds are allocated to working on this project, but as we see with the Central Florida Water Initiative, it really takes all of us to say, yes, we're going to commit to these conservation measures, to installing Florida-friendly landscapes and conserving the water in our landscapes, to turning the water off when we're brushing our teeth, to all that stuff, so that we can, save the water for our future and for our springs, for our wildlife and things like that. There are a lot of other organizations that you can get involved in that work specifically on springs preservation. But I think really the biggest thing in our democracy is just contacting your representatives and let them know that that is something that you're concerned about.
Thank you, Tina. And I put it here, it's called the minimum flows and levels. So you will see the acronym a lot. They call it MFLS, MFL, minimum flow and levels. So you can search and find the MFL for the springs you are interested in. Let me check.
Yeah, because each spring will have a different kind of requirement just based on the topography and history and historical data that's collected and things like that.
Awesome. So I hope we answer your question. And do we have, I'm checking our Facebook. We don't have any Facebook questions yet. And I don't see any questions on Zoom. But since we'll post the recordings, and if you have any questions, feel free just to leave in the comment section. I will, if I cannot answer that, I will direct a question to Tina or to Morgan and to get an answer to you. And we will really appreciate if you like our Water Wednesday, give us a thumb up and help us to spread the word. Let your friends and your family know we are doing Facebook Live every Wednesday afternoon. It doesn't take a lot of your time, just 30 minutes to learn about Florida's water and what we can do to protect Florida's water. So that's pretty much end of today's Water Wednesday. Thank you so much, Tina and Morgan. And also thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday afternoon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for having us.